Not necessarily surprised it's taken this long. I think we need to be clear about what we're hoping to accomplish by these travel restrictions. Most of the data shows that they have a negligible impact on transmission of the virus, on introduction of the virus into the United States. I can assure you that the variants that we're seeing circulating in India, including the new 617 variant, are here in the United States already. And so it's unclear how much more introduction we're going to get from a travel restriction. You know, if we are going to do this, we ought to be clear about what we're aiming to accomplish and also be clear about why we're maintaining travel restrictions against countries like China and UK at this point, which have very low levels of virus in both those countries. So we need to have a coherent strategy for lifting these travel restrictions as well after we implement them.
Yeah, my British cohort here, I think, would probably agree with you where the UK is concerned in particular. But just to dig into that a little bit more, then, just from a science standpoint, why would it make sense to put these advisories, these restrictions in place right now?
Look, there are some studies that show that when you implement travel restrictions, and most of the studies that have been done have looked at this in the context of an influenza pandemic, that you can delay introduction of a virus into a new region, that you slow the introduction and maybe reduce the peak of the epidemic that another country is going to experience. So if the U.S. had implemented travel restrictions that weren't so leaky very early, perhaps we could have delayed the introduction of the virus more and reduce the peak of the epidemic. But at this point, we have enough virus here in the United States that we're not going to prevent introduction of the virus from India. I think the only rationale that you could come up with for why we might implement travel restrictions at this point from India would be that you want to reduce the introduction of this 617 variant that's in India that we don't fully understand. But that variant's here anyway, and the best way to reduce the risk of that variant is, frankly, to get more Americans vaccinated. That's going to be the best backstop against the spread of that variant, not restricting travel at this point. Will it have an impact? Perhaps a minor impact on the margins in terms of reducing introductions. It's not going to dramatically affect our trajectory at this point. It's probably going to do more harm to India than any good that it attributes to us.
So let's move on to vaccination rates here in the U.S., Dr. Gottlieb. Clearly, there's plentiful supply. Are the levels of vaccination good enough that we can kind of continue as things are? Or what do you make of possible suggestions to pay people to actually get vaccinated, whether by the private sector, big companies, or the public sector?
Well, look, the vaccination rates are very good. It's been an outstanding effort by the administration to get people vaccinated, but it's going to slow down because a lot of the more intense demand, if you will, of people who wanted to get vaccinated have been worked off, and the people who haven't been vaccinated are more marginal customers. They're people who maybe are reluctant, but there are a lot of people also who just work all day and at night and they can't get to vaccination centers, or people who just aren't as anxious to get vaccinated and will need a little bit of more coaxing and maybe some marketing and more information about the vaccine. So I think we can continue to chip away at it. I think vaccination rates will slow. That doesn't mean that we're doing a bad job. I think it's inevitable that it's going to start to slow as you get into softer demand. It's like any other product. When you start getting into areas where you have softer demand, the uptake isn't as brisk. So we have to do more to push it out into communities. Things like vaccination buses where they just drive up into communities and people could show up and get vaccinated on site with no wait. That's the way we're going to get more people vaccinated. Also delivering vaccine through work sites. That's going to help as well.
Yeah, just in terms of softer demand, I mean, you could possibly already make the argument that we have seen the peak day in terms of daily distributions of vaccines as well, to your point. I'm curious, though, if we don't reach what the federal government is going to define as herd immunity, maybe not enough Americans want to get the shot that are still out there that haven't done so, what does that mean from a policy standpoint?
Well, I don't think we're going to reach anything that resembles true herd immunity where this virus stops circulating. It's going to continue to circulate at low levels. I think that we'll probably reach about 170 million people vaccinated by the summertime, by the end of June. That includes kids. If 12 to 15 gets authorized by the FDA, the Pfizer vaccine, the company I'm on the board of, has requested permission to start delivering the vaccine to 12 to 15-year-olds. We'll pick up 5 million kids, probably 12 to 15, once it's authorized. So we'll get to 170 million. If we continue to chip away at it through the summer, maybe we get to 200 million by the start of the fall. I think if we're at those kinds of levels, and we're not going to be far off them. I think if we're off them, it's not going to be by much. If we get to those kinds of levels, that's going to be enough protective immunity in the population through vaccination. That's going to be a pretty big backstop against really epidemic spread of this virus, because you're combining it with natural immunity. There are people who've had this infection who have immunity from natural infection who aren't getting vaccinated. They're also backstops against continued spread. They're less likely to get infected and less likely to transmit the infection.
Dr. Gottlieb, we saw this week Mayor de Blasio saying he wants to see New York back to normal, fully back to normal by early July, and Cuomo saying potentially even before then. All of us on the team were wondering, are you back to normal? Are you going back to restaurants? Is it safe to do so?
Look, I'm back to normal in certain aspects of my life, not in others. My children have resumed a lot of their normal activity. We're still being careful doing things outside. They still wear masks to school. I mean, on things where I have discretion, where I can preferentially do them outside or do them in a lower risk way, I'm still doing them. So when I go out to eat, and I am going out to restaurants, I eat outdoors. You know, I'm still wearing a mask in confined spaces. I'm going to be traveling on a plane on Sunday. I'm going to wear a mask door to door. So I'm still taking precautions where I can. I'm vaccinated, but I'm still taking precautions because the virus is still around. It's still a high prevalence environment. I think in 2 or 3 weeks, viral levels are going to be sufficiently low that we could start to really relax the steps we're taking. We're not quite there yet. I think we will be in a very short period of time. I think virus levels are going to start to collapse all through May.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.